All right, hello and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about intrusive thoughts related to driving or accidentally harming someone while you're driving. And so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Cotty and I'm the founder of Restored Minds and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And on this episode, I want to dive into this idea of intrusive thoughts that are related to driving or hurting someone with your vehicle. And, just before we dive in, we would really appreciate if you take the time to support us by liking and subscribing and even leaving a comment down below of, whether a future episode you might want us to record or questions you might have. We really would really appreciate your support. And so on this episode, I want to share a case study of someone I worked with who had and sometimes this is called like hit-and-run OCD. That's a common sub-theme that people will classify it as, but really the idea is the same as any other intrusive thoughts, right? The idea is that your mind is producing this what if thought, and it generally speaking, like, what if I hurt someone and I didn't realize it? What if I accidentally hit someone? What if that bump back there, was that really a person? And in the idea of like, what if I get into a crash when I'm driving, right? You know what I mean? It's these future and past oriented thoughts that are kind of invading a person's mind and that cause a lot of distress naturally because it's disturbing content. That's what makes it an intrusive thought, right? I mean, the mind's producing these disturbing images or words that are popping up. And so I think to start this episode, I want to talk about just that idea alone that when we're talking about intrusive thoughts, it's important to understand that the thoughts can be words and sentences, and they can also be intrusive images. Like sometimes people literally get the image of like having hurt someone or the image of a person they could have hurt in their mind, and that is the intrusive thought. And I think that's not talked about enough. And so I just want to talk about that for a second here on this episode, as we go on this series of intrusive thoughts, we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of amazing questions, by the way, so keep them coming. But a lot of people think intrusive thoughts are just word form in the mind. And I just want to be very clear that intrusive thoughts can absolutely be images that pop up, right? And so But it's still important to understand that they're both intrusive thoughts and both need to be treated the same way, right? We don't treat them differently, okay? And so now going back to the case study. So I once was working with this person, and they were having these intrusive thoughts about when they were driving, right? And they had these intrusive thoughts that, what if when I was driving, I accidentally ran someone over, right? And I remember what, it was so bad that what they would do is after they had this thought, they would always drive back to the place where they thought this happened. And then they would check to see if there was a body there or if someone had gotten hurt. And I've heard of, other clients where they're like calling around to hospitals to see like, hey, did anyone get hit by a car and no one claimed it, because I just want to make sure. And I've had other people, think about turning themselves into the police because they were like certain, hey man, I'm pretty sure I hit someone. And because what you need to understand about OCD and anxiety is that when that thought happens and that stress response kicks off, it feels very real. And the mistake that people make is that because the feeling is real, they think that because they're really experiencing the stress and anxiety, they think that it's an indication that something really did happen. And that's another disconnect that I want to talk about here, is this idea that your stress response can go off when it shouldn't, right? And it's essentially a false alarm, right? And let's use examples, right? How many times have you been stressed out about a plane flight and the plane took off and landed just fine? Right. But in your mind, it's like, I remember, talking to one person who had a fear of flying. I mean, that same thing is like, they just had this dread sense something terrible is going to happen. And because they felt that, it was this like, oh, it's for sure going to happen. And the plane would take off and it would land. And they never questioned in the future if their brain could really set off this false alarm. And with anxiety, in essentially every case of anxiety, your brain is setting off an alarm when it shouldn't be setting off an alarm. And the reason is because that's not happening right now. The stress response is designed to keep us alive right now. And the problem is that when our brain is producing these past images or these past possibilities or these futuristic ideas, and then we're reacting to them, those don't actually exist right now. So we're reacting to something that doesn't actually exist, And we do this all the time, all day. And we never question it, So When it comes to these intrusive thoughts about hit and run and driving, the first thing that, the first step for this person that I was working with was this idea of really starting to diffuse from your thoughts, right? And really start to notice that your mind can produce thoughts that aren't real, right? And that is like that voice of the mind when it's coming up with those what if thoughts. Just because it comes up with a what if thought does not mean that that is real. Like, how many times has your mind come up with a what if thought that never happened? How many times have you worried about something that never happened? And worrying is a form of suffering, right? Like this is a self-inflicted suffering that we're experiencing here because nothing is actually happening. And so when it comes to the intrusive driving thoughts, whether it's what if I hurt someone or what if I am going to hurt someone, the thing is that I've seen where people literally just drive in circles for hours, because in this particular case, the thought, even when the person went back to check the area where they thought they hit someone and no one was there, when they started driving away, they were like, well, what if I hit someone that time? And then they just drove back. I mean, I remember looking at someone in this building I was working in once, and they just kept driving around the building. They couldn't get out of their car. Because every time they made a loop, I remember being on the phone with the person like, please put your car in park and go right there in that spot. Like I was looking at them and they just wouldn't get out of their car. You know what I mean? Because the fear was so intense that they ended up just driving away. Now, and the reason that I share this is because I know that it feels very real. And like I said, OCD and anxiety always roots itself in some kind of realistic possibility. But the difference is that it's always this doubt-based fear as opposed to like, hey, something happened and I actually feel guilty about it. It's this doubt of what if it happened. And the moment you hear what if it happened, that is the giveaway that is OCD and anxiety, right? That what if is what we're looking for. And so once we start to realize that those thoughts are there, then we start to diffuse from them, right? We start to realize that they're ego dystonic, that they aren't something that, you need to pay attention to. Because every time you do a behavior that confirms that could have been real, that is actually what keeps your mind from producing the thought. So people will ask, well, I've worried about this for, a year, 2 years, 10 years, this same fear. Well, why is that? Because you keep doing behaviors that are reinforcing it. And that's why we need to shift our focus as opposed to treating this as I really hurt someone or even a thought or feeling problem to a behavioral issue. Right? And really targeting the behaviors that you're doing that are reinforcing this. And that's, over at Restored Minds, a great place to start with this is our free training that we have available. And we have some links we're actually right down in the notes here that will take you right over to it. Because what we don't realize is that a lot of the behaviors we do are mental. And so a lot of the analyzing and the ruminating, we think that that's actually the obsession. But what that is the mental behavior you're doing to try to resolve the intrusive thought. And it's so important that you're able to distinct that, because a lot of people think that just because it's happening in my head, that must be the obsession. But the reality is that is actually the behavior you're doing. Okay. And once we're able to distinct those things, then it's about targeting the behaviors and really challenging and changing those behaviors, to ultimately allow your brain to rewire through neuroplasticity. And that's what we do is as we challenge the behaviors, that's what gives our brain the ability to heal from this and ultimately break that loop. So, and during this, that included things like, purposely driving, writing narratives. We also included, things like acceptance and commitment therapy in this person's recovery process, because, really committing to their values and what that was like. And, the reality is if they wanted to spend time with their family, driving around for 3 hours a day in a loop didn't allow for that, right? So we had to, it was a combination of learning to diffuse from those thoughts and also identifying all the different behaviors that the person was doing, physical and mental, and then using tools like the AAA response that we teach at Restored Minds, as well as other tools such as acceptance commitment therapy, mindfulness, and practicing driving consistently without doing the behaviors. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, if you're dealing with this, really encourage you as a first step to go over to our site at Restored Minds, check out our free training, or download our book, to get started. We also have our complete boot camp, to really work on this so that you have the skill set sets that you need to really take back control of your life, because this is something that you can't overcome regardless of how long you've dealt with it. It's just about understanding what you need to do that. So thank you so much for taking the time to hang out today. I really hope you found this episode helpful. And again, we really appreciate your support by subscribing and liking and sharing and commenting as well. So again, my name is Matt Cotty. Thank you. I hope you guys have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for watching that video. And so if you're struggling with OCD and anxiety, I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training for you over at Restored Minds, where you can start learning how to use our AAA response to really break out of that loop and ultimately take back control of your life. And all you need to do to access is just click the little link below, and you'll be taken to a page where you can register today. Thank you so much.